Adobe has just released what I consider to possibly be the best Adobe Premiere Pro update that we've gotten in a long while. And I am super stoked to show you all the cool features included and what else they have going on in terms of added features and updated support and things like that right after this. Useful tech education and gaming nostalgia that won't put you to sleep. Get subscribed and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next guide. I'm EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun, and today we're taking a look at an Adobe Premiere Pro update. They have released a couple cool features and added a little bit of kind of subtle support that I wouldn't have initially looked at. I actually initially ignored this update entirely because most of the features, all the blog posts and stuff we're focusing on were color matching features, which are kind of neat. Motion graphics, templates, features, things like that, things that I don't really use, and so I wasn't giving a whole lot of attention to. And so I'm going to mostly skip over those in this video. I will have a link to a Premiere Pro blog post in the description below that covers those, but I want to focus some more on some of the nitty gritty stuff. So let's flip over to the desktop and check it out. The color matching feature is really cool in that you can match some colors. You can load up a analysis of a single clip and relatively easily match up the color to the next clip if needed. Not something I use, as I don't do a whole lot of color grading or that kind of work. Pretty neat. And they also have a couple motion graphics templates. You can bypass and reset the Lumetri color correction, which is really cool. But those aren't really the things I am interested in. I'm going to make a new project here, and forgive me if I sound a little weird. I am very under the weather today, but I really wanted to get this video out. Premiere update. All right, so you can see here I've taken the introductory clip here, dragged it into the timeline, synced it up, and applied a basic color grade. It's nothing great. This may not be what I go with. I have a lot of trouble getting color correct. But now in the Lumetri color panel here, and over here in the effects controls panel, depending on where you're editing Lumetri color, you now have the ability to toggle the effects off just entirely without having to uncheck individual boxes, which gives you a quick before and after look at your footage. And actually, as I'm doing that, that certainly looks a lot better than the before. And you can reset it back to 0, which is really freaking handy. Like, these are obvious features that should have been in there for a long time, but they're here. Now, if you're like me and sometimes go a little too crazy with your color grades, let's just like push it way too far here, just make it look absurd. That looks hideous, and that is a lot of information. And actually, if we look at the scopes, we're clipping on the low and high ends in terms of colors all over the place. Well, they have added a new effect called the video limiter. If you type in video limiter into the effects box, it's under here under color grading or under color correction. Drag it onto your video clip, and it will appear. You definitely want it applied after your color grade. Now you can choose your limit basis that you're using for limiting your color. So if we choose the SMTP range, we can apply some color correction before color compression before clipping. I'm gonna add a gamut warning, and that shows all of the color or information levels that are way out of broadcast range, and that is most of the image as expected, which certainly helps quite a bit. And we can say none. So we apply no compression. There we go. So you have the different ranges. And actually, if we're just limiting it for an SDI transmission, of course SDI has a lot of range, very little of it is actually clipping, which is pretty handy. But this helps you out with limiting for broadcast. Again, I don't do a whole lot for that. While you certainly don't want your colors clipping too much when using or when rendering for the web, you don't have to worry about that quite as much. Now, this is something you can apply inline in your editing, as you see here, or if you open up the export dialog, this is actually in the effects tab for your exports now as well. There's a lot of effects here. Yeah, video limiter. So you can apply that at the end of your render as well if you just want to apply a video limiter to your entire rendered sequence, of course, which would make sense. There are some updates to the essential graphics panel as well, toggling animation, presets, rotation scale, things like that. Again, something I do not mess with. but worth checking out this blog post if you are interested in as well as you can make color gradients within the graphics panel, some new Adobe stock integration, you can search for stuff, basic stuff there, just updates to that as they're fleshing out this new graphics involvement. But the coolest feature that I think they have added in this update will actually require me to do a little bit of editing here real quick, so I'll be back in just a sec. Alright, so I've just done a super basic job here of putting my nested sequence of my introduction clip here, which is still got the video limiter and crazy color grade applied, and adjusted its levels, and then thrown a music track on. Now, to balance music, which is something I have historically had a terrible time with, as many of you probably know, I typically come over here on my other monitor and use the audio track mixer to just lower the music volume and then keep playing it back and get it to a point. Actually ignored this update entirely. I feel like it's fine. The problem is sometimes the final render for whatever reason doesn't sound exactly like this mix does, or I don't get it quite right, and that requires re-rendering the entire thing. Or certain songs have quieter points, like this will sound gotten in a long while. It's a lot quieter than this full out epic bit. And so it's not the best way to do things. Now, I generally do still put my audio track on like a -4 or a -3.5, something like that. So it's not, it's in a good place to start out. But then they have added a auto ducking feature. Now, auto ducking is something I also introduced, or was also introduced in the OBS 21-ish update, which I still have to make my tutorial on. But it basically allows you to automatically raise and lower the volume of the song based on another source of audio. And you can actually do this with hardware as well if you have the right hardware. And so I feel like with this raw, where I haven't cut out the gaps yet, this is the perfect example to show you. So as you saw, my vocal track is +1.1 dB and my music is -3, which is going to be way too imbalanced for normal use. But this is where the essential sound panel comes into play, and I don't honestly have room for that in my workflow, so I keep it closed for the most part. But come up here to Window, Essential Sound, and for me it always pops up this giant, ridiculous looking window that I have to resize every time I open it, which is really obnoxious. And here you have the new sound effects workflow. Now, this annoys me a lot because it always automatically applies certain effects that I don't want, but it's still very useful. So first, you need to select your vocal track, and you need to select them all, which for me is just going to be this one for now, but you need to select all the different clips and then assign it the dialogue audio type. Now, you don't technically have to do this. There is another way to do this, which I will show you in a minute, but for simplicity's sake right now, select your dialogue types. And then for me, of course, I want to uncheck all of these because I don't want it to apply any processing. And it applies all of this junk on its own, which is what I was talking about. It annoys the crap out of me. It just applies a preset. There's no, none. I need to make it, empty. I guess that's it. I think I saved that myself. So now this audio track down here is assigned as dialogue because that's my voiceover track. Now we select the music track, assign it as music. Now here, things get fun. I'm going to uncheck the loudness one. We have a ducking setting. So if you click on it to expand it, and then click the checkbox, now you can have it automatically adjust based on your microphone track. Now, it may be a little bit more tedious to actually mark your dialogue as dialogue, because then if you move it around, you have to regenerate keyframes and you have to select each individual one. But you have a few options. You can duck against the dialogue assignment. You can duck against music clips if you're ducking something else, like game sound, for instance. If you're doing like a game video, you can duck it against the sound effects assigned thing. You can duck it against ambient clips if you have ambient clips in your project, or you can just tell it to duck against anything that hasn't been assigned, which means you don't have to assign your other audio clips to dialogue or anything. You can just tell it to duck against every other sound that exists. So you have that selection option, and you can choose multiple. So if you just needed to duck against everything, you select everything other than music, basically. Now you get to play around with the sensitivity and setting and things like that. So you want to choose how much you reduce it by, and that is while the audio you want to duck against is playing. So while my vocals are playing, Currently it's set to minus 18 dB. Now I know historically with my music, that is nowhere near enough. So I'm going to go come closer to like minus 30 dB, because that is more what I normally have to limit it myself. And then sensitivity is how much, how loud your audio has to be. This is kind of vague because that's more sensitive. So I guess maybe 7 might be good. And then you get to control your fades in terms of how smoothly or how quickly it bounces up and down. So we're going to leave it at 800 ms, and we're going to hit generate keyframes. And now you can see down here on the timeline, if I move the panel out of the way, you see the keyframes where it's going up and down based on the vocals. So if we play it back now, we're going to start just like right here. And updated support and things like that right after this. I'm EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun, and today we're taking a look at an Adobe Premiere Pro update. Now that is really, really cool, and the advantage, of course, of doing this in post instead of doing it live is you get that really smooth decrease before your audio starts, which I really, really love. Now, of course, it was a little too loud when it was just playing by itself, so I can drag this entire line down and say -9, so then when it goes up, it only goes up to -9. Or you can use the audio track mixer for that as well. You just keep in mind, if you adjust the audio track mixer, then that minus however much dB is added on top of the individual clip keyframes. But then, say for example, you do some more editing after you've already adjusted your audio. Let me drag this over a bit. Suddenly that doesn't match up. That's a problem. Select your music, go to the ducking part, regenerate the keyframes, and it moves it over for you. This feature is phenomenal. It's super clutch. It's going to come in so handy for me. It's going to save me a lot of time. It's going to help me improve the quality of my videos. You're probably going to see more music. I am excited. But that's not all they've done with the program. Of course not. They've actually added a lot more. If we come over here to Window and go to Timecode, they have made the Timecode window ridiculously more useful. Originally, it literally just showed the timecode from your program monitor, basically. But now, if you right-click it, you can display what it's actually showing. You get 3 different categories here. You get to choose your source tracks that it's coming from. The format, you can choose, the time base of the source that it's coming from, or you can adapt it to specific frame rates. A lot of stuff that is honestly above my head. You can add or remove lines to just get a lot of time codes going. So if you do a lot of time sync specific work, it's really cool. They've really fleshed that out a lot. And I have seen a lot of workflows where they have a dedicated screen for the time code, because keeping everything synced up and jacked in is very important. All right, so another cool feature for me specifically that I think will be incredibly useful is if you add markers to a sequence here. What? Hello? Marker? Marker? All right, I've added all of those markers to this sequence. And then if I go up here to the markers window, now you have a checkbox for copy paste includes sequence markers and ripple sequence markers, which means when you delete stuff, the markers will move, which for some people you will want that disabled. For me, that's incredibly useful because I will, for example, so we have these markers here. If I delete out this blank space, the marker moves now. Previously, if I started deleting stuff, the marker would not move. Now, granted, if I individually move clips and do that, not so much, but if I am just ripple deleting, the markers go with them. But what the primary new feature and what is really cool here is now with that copy paste include sequence markers, if I copy all of this and then we make a new sequence, blah, 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 and I paste it, those markers come with it. Which, again, for all uses, may not be useful. But this is incredibly useful for me. For some of my timelines, I actually block out. I'll come over here, and I'll extend this a bit and give it a name. Like for my OBS master course, I had Chapter 1, UI. And that, and then they all had fancy label colors and everything like that. And if I needed to copy to something else, having those sequence markers come with it was really handy. They've added some updates for VR workflows, which if you're editing in VR, I really want to know how that's going. Some team projects updates, but one that I was really interested in was they added file format support for the new Canon C200 formats. There's a new C-RAW functionality, a Sony Venice format, I guess, from their new camera. The new IPP2 image processing pipeline from the Red cameras, format support for that. They've also dropped support for older QuickTime 7 formats, which is very strange. Their justification here is Adobe continuously aims to keep up with the most modern workflows and support formats and codecs broadly used across professional film and video industries. I don't know how that's justification for removing support for formats, but for whatever reason, they're removing support for QuickTime 7 dependent formats. Now, the distinction here is that previously, when you're using QuickTime related formats, you had to have QuickTime installed on your system in order for them to work and be imported and yada yada, which included older formats like ProRes and things like that. With recent updates over the past few years, Premiere has moved to supporting formats such as ProRes, DNX, Animation, Cineform natively within the software, which means you don't need QuickTime for them anymore, and ones that rely on QuickTime are no longer supported, and that's mainly because QuickTime itself is no longer supported and outdated, and nobody should be using it anymore on Windows. So, worth noting. But, do they have it here? I don't think this is here. Yeah. So, what I was super stoked for, this is something people have been asking for a lot right here. I'm going to make this really freaking big so you cannot miss it. Hardware acceleration. The big Final Cut Pro versus Adobe Premiere Pro render time showdown nonsense that all of the tech tubers and their little MacBooks keep running around about is Final Cut Pro renders on the Intel, or using Intel Quick Sync video on the Intel processors in the MacBooks, and Premiere Pro doesn't. Until now. On Windows 10, with 6th generation or later Intel Core processors with Quick Sync video, which unfortunately none of my desktops have, and it will render H.264 files if you enable it with the Quick Sync video chip, which will speed things up quite a bit. Now, if I tell it to export here, I am on an i9-7980XE right now, which does not have Quick Sync video for whatever reason. Well, I know the reason, but they don't enable, onboard graphics and things like that for their higher end desktop platform. But if I use H.264 here, we go to video, it's going to be under your video settings. And also, have I mentioned how terrible their export settings window is? Come over here. Under encoding settings, you now have a performance section, which allows you to choose hardware acceleration when it's available. Now, this is a huge step. This is a huge step in terms of performance, because that will mean on computers with those chips that have Quick Sync video, render times will be faster. And even on Mac OS systems, you now get H.264 and HEVC, or H.265, encoding accelerated on High Sierra or newer. And this applies to a lot more Macs than just 6th generation. I just recently obtained, for relatively cheap for what it is, a 2013 MacBook Pro with a 4th generation Intel Core i5, which has the Quick Sync video enabled, and I can render on it now in a Premiere Pro with hardware accelerated encoding, which is insane. Will help renders a lot, and this is really kind of neat. The next step, however, is they need to enable CUDA accelerated or NVENC accelerated encoding as well. This is something the brand new Vegas Pro 15 version has, and I will have a separate video on that soon. But they actually have NVIDIA accelerated encoding for their H.264 presets, which is ridiculously bonkers fast. So supporting Quick Sync is definitely a good move and a good way to move forward, but they definitely need to support NVIDIA encoding as well. Supposedly Premiere Pro, I heard a couple people talking about on Reddit, supposedly it now supports 4K scaling a little bit better. It's been working fine for me for the past year or more. It looks fine to me. It's always worked fine with proper window scaling. It hasn't cooperated great with like 125% and weird percentages like that, but 200%, it works and looks great. But for some people, it's apparently working better. They do now have a better bug reporting tool and feature request tool. Well, not better. It's a new one. It's a new one, and you vote on features that you want, and you submit your own. Supposedly, they may or may not listen to them. I don't really know. this does provide a bit more transparency, given that now you get to see what ideas other people are supporting, you get to see how many people want them, and in certain situations, you get to see deliberate responses to said features. Whereas before, you were basically sending your ideas into a black hole to be shredded. So now you actually get to see a bit more of what's going on. One more feature before I get to what I am going to be super nerdy about is they have also added support, and this isn't anywhere in the changelog, so I don't know what happened there, but they have sort of enabled the ability to import Mkv files into your Premiere projects. This has never been possible before, as Mkv is specifically supposed to be a sealed up, corruption protected, like archival container, because it can contain just about anything. H.264, H.265, uncompressed, like it can contain a lot of different codecs. And it's always just been one of those weird containers. And it's prone to header bugs, such as if you record to Mkv in OBS, the data rate is always 0 or the lowest, in which case audio is 64, and the frame rate is 1000 frames per second, even though that's obviously not true. And typically, if you record in programs like OBS Studio, you have to remux the file to a MP4 file. And if you're doing like montages of shadily downloaded or ripped Blu-rays or something, or doing like anime music videos, you always had to remux those to an MP4 file or some other format to be able to edit. Well, now you can drag it directly into Premiere, which is a huge step. It has multiple audio tracks. The names are not brought in from OBS, which is disappointing, but that doesn't seem to ever happen. The problem is that red screen right there. Right there. This is a very common corruption bug that actually used to be a huge problem when importing normal MP4s to both Vegas Pro and Premiere Pro. And so clearly they're having some issues reading the container, which is why this is not a flawless, foolproof solution. But if they get it working in the long run, that will mean that you are saved some headache of needing to remux. And actually, part of the clip here, actually it seems very inconsistent. Sometimes it shows the frame and sometimes it does not. Like it's having a whole lot of trouble reading it. And part of that, I think, is due to the corrupted header information. Because if you look under the properties for this file, it still reads that whole 1000 FPS corrupted glitch from OBS. So I'm going to be chatting with the OBS devs soon, trying to see if they can put a higher priority on figuring out that bug and trying to fix it, because it's really freaking obnoxious, and that may be contributing to what is going on here. Lastly, that I have to talk about today, this has been a very long video, but like I said, this may be the best update they have given this software, is they now have a new tutorial platform, a new educational platform. They have reworked it. It is really cool. If you go to Window, Workspaces, and Learning, they now have baked in tutorials on what you can do, and it will do a whole lot of really cool things. So I am going to close, actually, I'm going to just start learning the interface. It is going to open its own project. It's going to open the tutorial project. It's going to walk you through the interface. It's going to automatically, it's going to show you step by step within the software what you need to do. And as you're following along, it will actually import the project media that you're wanting to work with. And it even shows down here, you have a tutorial list, you have which step you're on, you have next, back, and forward buttons. So I'm just going to skip through this because I know how the interface works. Tutorial, importing media, click next, importing media. It's going to tell you how to do it. But then if we load up one that's actually about editing, it's going to automatically load these clips. Now, this could be problematic. This could cause some competition issues for lynda.com and similar services that are designed to walk you through this, where they provide exercise files that you download and open and use like this. What I would like to see in the future is maybe a partnership between services like lynda.com and Adobe, wherein you get the Lynda experience within this learning program. So you can use the free tutorials for like basic stuff, but if you want the more advanced hands-on Lynda tutorials, they actually like are integrated into this learning platform. You sign in with your Lynda account and it walks through and imports these clips for you. And you get like a little video player of the Lynda course, so you can drag it out to a separate window and follow along, and it actually works with the clips with you. That would be so freaking sick. And as an educator, And as someone who makes tutorials like this, I am so beyond excited for a feature like this, essentially to put me out of a job. Like, this is incredible. This is improving. This is great stuff. Adobe, this was a fantastic update to your software with this one, and I really hope you keep it up. This has been a really long video, a really long video, covering a lot of features for Adobe Premiere, but I wanted to make sure they were covered because this is super incredibly useful. The auto ducking, the learning, there's so much. There is so much, and I was so excited to just throw down an extra Tuesday video for you guys to show you these features. I am EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Comment below with what your favorite update or feature was, or if you're still looking for a feature to be added to the software, let me know. Subscribe for more awesome tech content and educational videos like this one, and I will see you in the next one.